It was 2 a.m. when Emily settled into her desk for another night shift at the office. As a junior accountant, she often volunteered for the overnight shifts to get ahead on her work. The office was quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights the only sound breaking the silence. The building was empty except for the security guard downstairs, and Emily liked the peacefulness of working alone. But that night, something felt off. Emily had been working for about an hour when she heard it, a faint tapping sound like someone gently knocking on glass. She looked up from her computer, her heart skipping a beat. The sound was coming from the hallway outside her cubicle. She hesitated, then stood up and peered around the corner. The hallway was empty, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly. Emily shook her head, telling herself it was just the building settling. She sat back down and tried to focus on her work, but the tapping continued, growing louder and more insistent. "Emily? Hello? Is someone there?" There was no response. The tapping stopped, and the office fell silent again. Emily tried to brush it off, but her unease grew with every passing minute. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there. Around 3 a.m., Emily decided to take a break. She grabbed her coffee mug and headed to the break room, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As she filled her mug, she heard the tapping again, this time coming from the conference room across the hall. Emily's heart raced as she crept toward the conference room, her mug trembling in her hand. The door was slightly ajar, and she pushed it open, her breath catching in her throat. The room was empty, but the whiteboard at the front was covered in writing. It was scrawled in red marker, the letters jagged and uneven. "Get out!" Emily's blood ran cold. She backed out of the room, her hands trembling. She didn't know what to do. She thought about calling security, but the guard was downstairs, and she didn't want to seem paranoid. She decided to finish her work as quickly as possible and leave. But as she sat back down at her desk, the tapping started again. This time, it was coming from right behind her. Emily froze, her heart pounding. She didn't want to turn around, but she had to know. She spun around in her chair, her breath catching in her throat. There was nothing there, just the empty cubicle and the flickering fluorescent lights. She let out a shaky breath, trying to calm herself down. That's when she saw it. A shadow moving across the wall. It was tall and thin, its shape vaguely human but distorted, as if it were made of smoke. Emily's heart raced as she watched the shadow glide across the wall, its movements slow and deliberate. It stopped in front of her, its hollow eyes staring directly at her. Emily screamed, scrambling out of her chair and backing away. The shadow didn't move, but its smile widened, its teeth sharp and jagged. Emily turned and ran, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. She didn't stop until she was safely in the elevator, her heart pounding in her chest. The next morning, Emily told her boss what had happened. He laughed it off, telling her it was just her imagination. But Emily knew what she had seen. She never worked the night shift again. To this day, Emily refuses to stay late at the office. And sometimes when she's alone in the building, she hears the tapping again, low and insistent, as if something is trying to get her attention. Mark had been working as a night security guard at the old hospital for over a year. The job was simple: patrol the empty halls, check the locks, and make sure nothing was out of place. The hospital had been closed for decades, but the owners kept it staffed with a skeleton crew to maintain the building. Mark didn't mind the solitude. He liked the quiet, the stillness of the empty halls. But that all changed one night. It was around 3 a.m. when Mark heard the sound. He was sitting in the security office, scrolling through the surveillance feeds, when he heard it. A faint knocking, like someone tapping on glass. He frowned, leaning closer to the monitor. The sound was coming from the East Wing, an area of the hospital that had been sealed off for years. Mark grabbed his flashlight and radio, his heart pounding as he headed toward the East Wing. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from his flashlight. The knocking grew louder as he approached, echoing through the empty halls. He stopped outside the door to the east wing, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. The door was locked, just as it should be. Mark shone his flashlight through the small window in the door, but the room beyond was pitch black. He pressed his ear against the door, listening for the sound. It was coming from inside, faint but insistent. Mark hesitated, then unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was cold, the smell of mildew and decay filling his nostrils. He shone his flashlight around the room, the beam cutting through the darkness. The room was empty, the walls lined with old medical equipment and broken furniture. The knocking stopped, and the room fell silent. Mark's heart raced as he scanned the room, his flashlight trembling in his hand. That's when he saw it. A figure standing in the corner of the room. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by shadows. Mark's breath caught in his throat as the figure stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. Mark demanded, "Who are you? This area is off limits." The figure didn't respond. It just kept coming, its hollow eyes fixed on Mark. He backed away, his heart pounding, but the figure was faster. It reached out, its hand cold and clammy as it grabbed his wrist. Mark screamed, struggling to break free, but the figure's grip was like iron. It pulled him closer, its face inches from his. Mark could see its eyes now, black and empty, like two bottomless pits. Its smile widened, its teeth sharp and jagged. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered, its voice low and guttural. Mark's vision blurred as the figure tightened its grip, the room spinning around him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The last thing he saw was the figure's smile, wide and unnatural, before everything went black. The next morning, Mark's replacement found the security office empty. The surveillance feeds were still running, but there was no sign of Mark. The east wing door was locked, just as it should be. The replacement called the police, but they found nothing. Mark was gone, without a trace. To this day, no one knows what happened to Mark, but sometimes when the night is quiet and the halls are empty, the knocking returns, low and insistent, as if something is trying to get out. It was 11 p.m. when Sarah started her shift at the 24-hour call center. The job was monotonous, answering customer service calls, troubleshooting issues, and logging complaints. But Sarah didn't mind. She liked the quiet of the night shift, the way the office felt like her own private world. The call center was located in a nondescript office building, and at night, the only other person in the building was the janitor, who worked in the basement. Around 1 a.m., Sarah's phone rang. She picked it up, her voice cheerful and professional. "Sarah, thank you for calling TechServe. This is Sarah. How can I help you?" There was silence on the other end, followed by a faint, static-filled whisper. Voice. "Sarah." Sarah frowned, adjusting her headset. "Sarah? Hello? I can't hear you very well. Can you speak up, please?" The whisper came again, louder this time. Voice. "Sarah? Help me." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The voice sounded distorted, like it was coming from far away. "Sarah? Sir or ma'am, I'm having trouble hearing you. Can you repeat that?" The line crackled, and the voice grew clearer. Voice. "Sarah? I'm trapped. You have to help me." Sarah's blood ran cold. She glanced at her computer screen, but the caller ID was blank. "Sarah. Where are you? What's your name?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, it began to recite her full name, her address, and even her mother's maiden name. Details no one should know. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency button to disconnect the call, but the line went dead before she could press it. She sat there for a moment, her heart pounding. She told herself it was just a prank call, but something about the voice felt wrong. She tried to shake it off and went back to work, but the call lingered in her mind. An hour later, the phone rang again. Sarah hesitated, then picked it up. Sarah. "Thank you for calling Tech Serve. This is Sarah. How can I help you?" The same voice came through, clearer this time. "Sarah, you didn't help me. Now I'm coming for you." Sarah slammed the phone down, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She called security, but the janitor was the only one in the building, and he hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. Sarah tried to calm herself down, but the fear was overwhelming. Around 3 a.m., the phone rang again. Sarah stared at it, her hands trembling. She didn't want to answer, but her training kicked in. She picked it up, her voice shaking. "Thank you for calling TechServe. This is Sarah. How can I help you?" The voice was different this time, deeper, more menacing. "Sarah, look behind you." Sarah froze, her heart pounding. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't help herself. She turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The office was empty, but the shadows seemed to move on their own, shifting and twisting like living things. Sarah's blood ran cold as she watched the shadows coalesce into a figure, tall and thin, its face obscured by darkness. It stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. "Sarah," it whispered, its voice echoing through the empty office. "You should have helped me." Sarah screamed, scrambling out of her chair and backing away. The figure didn't move, but its smile widened, its teeth sharp and jagged. Sarah turned and ran, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. She didn't stop until she was safely in the elevator, her heart pounding in her chest. The next morning, Sarah told her boss what had happened. He laughed it off, telling her it was just her imagination. But Sarah knew what she had seen. She never worked the night shift again. To this day, Sarah refuses to answer the phone after dark. And sometimes when she's alone, she hears the whispers again, low and insistent, as if something is trying to get her attention. And there you have it. 3 chilling night shift horror stories that will make you think twice about working alone after dark. From shadowy figures in the office to mysterious calls that shouldn't exist, these tales remind us that sometimes the night holds more than just silence. But here's the thing. These stories aren't just meant to scare you. They're a reminder that the world is full of mysteries we can't explain. So, the next time you're working late, keep your wits about you. Because you never know what might be lurking in the shadows. If these stories gave you chills, don't forget to hit that like button and let me know in the comments which one scared you the most. Was it the shadow in the office, the night guard's disappearance, or the call that never ended? Share this video with your friends who love a good scare, and make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a spine-tingling story. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you hear something in the dark, don't answer. Stay curious, stay scared, and I'll see you in the next video.